So let's not try to just say that we're all the same and we've all had the same journey. No. The lack of that understanding can lead to miss out on so many quick failures.
Welcome to the Culture Edge podcast. Are you an entrepreneur or a change maker who's frustrated with the pace of change inside your organisation? Well, this show will, I hope, offer you valuable practical advice as you navigate your career. And our guests will also help you answer the question, am I better matched to the corporate world or to the startup world? My name is Stephen Parkins, and I'm determined to help people like you and your business build a strong, healthy culture of innovation. Today we welcome Vrinda Kabra, a business designer with a fascinating entrepreneurial background. Vrinda co-founded a startup focused on ethical plastics recycling, and now she works for the UN's World Food Programme as an innovation venture consultant. So today we're talking about diversity in innovation, its strengths, but also its nuances and complexities. Well, welcome, Vrinda. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Well, it's a real pleasure and quite a funny observation that you're able to join me on this podcast here today. We've never met in person, and yet here we are able to do this podcast together. I mean, these are the wonders of modern technology. And well, I understand you've been an entrepreneur. Maybe tell us about your own experience and how technology and the new possibilities have led and influenced your own entrepreneurial journey.
That's right. We live in such an interesting world, right, Steve, where not just the ideas are able to cross from one continent to another, but also the ability to execute those ideas. There are possibilities of that as well. So two examples that come to my mind from my experience. One is from my venture journey. At the beginning of COVID, I was looking for jobs in EU while I was sitting in India. And it so happened that because of our good technology, social media, LinkedIn, I came across my then co-founder. And by the way, we've never met. And we just connected on LinkedIn and shared some ideas and decided to kick off a venture for impact. And we were in the plastic recycling industry.
So just for my understanding, so you actually started a company with someone that you'd never met in person.
Correct. That's right. And not just started, we worked for 2 years all together, but we built a company from 2 to 10 individuals.
Oh, wow. So you even recruited more people as well.
Right, yeah. Right. And I had not met a single one of them for at least 2 years. And by the way, I haven't met a few of them even now, even after three years of that incident. So yeah, it's such a wonderful world that we are living in. Now that I think about it, I'm wondering, how did this happen? Like strangers just meeting online and aligning on a mission and kicking off with a venture. So that's one crazy innovation story that I can think of. And the second one, in my current organization as well, I get to work with a whole lot of entrepreneurs from around the world, from Africa, from Southeast Asia. And we are able to collaborate on different ideas in real time because of some innovative tools that are out there like Zoom, Slack, Mural Board. And it's just wonderful to see how close, yet so far we are all working together. So yeah, technology has for sure increased our potential to innovate and collaborate in so many ways.
Where are all your colleagues based today? So this is part of the World Food Programme, right? You're talking about?
Correct. So I come from a team of 15 people now. And we have over 7 nationalities just within this small team of ours. But we collaborate with a lot of ventures in Africa. So essentially what I help them do is interact with some business management tools and guide them through these tools to solidify their blueprint or help them to scale their businesses in their particular landscape.
Great. And so you're able to do that thanks to these new collaboration tools. And are these a recent introduction, or have you always worked this way with these tools like Slack and Mural and so on?
Yeah, not really. I think this is, I mean, I joined the World Food Program only a year ago. What I hear is before the COVID times, a major part of these activities were happening offline. But due to COVID, everyone was pushed to innovate in different ways, to be more creative on how can we still run the show. So that's when we took, I think, a big chunk of what we do online, and we've managed to make it more efficient and enhance the communication online drastically. So yeah, it's not always been the same. Thanks to COVID, we are really saving up on a whole lot of resources, of course, for that reason as
And
well.
you've avoided a lot of flights as well, so done your bit for the
Exactly.
for the planet as well. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly relate to the experience. I've gone through it myself of working with teams across the world through video calls and online tools to share resources, etc. And as you know, one of the big themes of this podcast is the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial minds and where they feel most at home. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would guess that somewhere like the UN is so rich in diversity, given the fact that it's a global organization with people from all over the world participating. Given that diversity is such a key ingredient to innovation, does that make it the most perfect place to innovate? Is it just a paradise for innovation then, working somewhere like the UN?
I think diversity, not just in international organizations like the UN, but also smaller ventures, the ventures that I work with, it's it's quite prevalent even there. Like I know a lot of people, let's say a founder from the US is trying to have an impact in Africa, right? So diversity, I think, has become like a commonplace in a lot of micro and macro organizations. And I love the topic of diversity because it really enables you to bring on such different perspectives onto the table and open your minds to different possibilities. And isn't that the baseline for innovation, right? So within our organizations, I think we're blessed to have a culture where a safe culture, a safe space where we do thrive on each other's differences and we do feel that there is a safe space to voice our perspectives. So I would say, yeah, we've been managing to, at least within my department, we've been managing to do it quite well. But I do have, everything's not perfect, right? I do have some points where I feel like we might be a bit more challenged, and we might be missing out on some nuances when it comes to around diversity
Hmm.
that we could potentially leverage on.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, if you could share a couple of examples of what you mean by
sure.
that would be great.
So, for example, I feel like a lot of organizations want to have like people from different diverse backgrounds, and they put all of these different people, let's say, in one common table. But my question is like, are you enabling and empowering these people who are sitting on the table to perform their best, to have the right voice, or to provide with the safe space to actually add on to their perspective, bring on their ideas and thoughts to the table? That's one of the biggest challenges that I see that organizations, micro or macro alike, they should be a bit mindful of. So, in the name of collaboration, I feel people bring in diversity into the mix. But at the same time, I don't think we are embracing diversity. We are just encouraging it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that's something I've seen at large organizations, or large and small organizations as well, is the recognition that diversity is important. So then there's a workshop organized or a token action is taken to say, oh, well, look, we've added a whole load of diverse people, that doesn't mean that they've been included, though, does it? That just means that
Exactly.
you've added a bunch of people to your organization. It doesn't mean they've been accepted. It doesn't mean that they've joined the core of the organization and enriched that core. It's not
Correct.
an automatic thing. So I get the feeling that the inclusion part is often missing, and arguably that needs to happen before you could make any real efforts at increasing diversity.
Absolutely. And I mean, just a simple example, you and I probably speak the same language, that is English, but the interpretation of the same words used would be different. And that's based on your experience or your cultural understanding of, or your way of communication, right? For example, if a Brit says that something's interesting, what would be understood by, let's say, a Dutch person would be that it is interesting, like you
That's
mean
right.
what you're saying, right? However, what they probably mean and what's the underlying message is like, well, I don't really like the idea. Let's move on. So I think that's the kind of understanding that we are lacking at the moment. And while in the short run, these things can be, shoved under the rug, in the long run, I feel that this is not sustainable. And this is what happened with my venture, with the startup that I was working on as well, right? Like I was working with few German colleagues, and we really got on because of the mission of the venture. However, there was such gap in communication, or the way we understood the communication that was coming from both sides, that towards the end, after 2 years of working together, we were like, we don't understand each other at all. What you said, how you're saying things is completely not the way I've been understanding them.
You're listening to the Culture Edge podcast. If you care about innovation and you want practical lessons for your career, you're in a great place with our entrepreneurially minded guests. Subscribe and be the first to know each time we release a new episode. That misunderstanding, was that at a very high level in terms of what your strategy was as a business, or was it more on sort of day-to-day operations and just getting through the working week?
I think towards the end, when the problem was too big, it started becoming a day-to-day difference, right? But when you unpack all of these differences, what you understand is actually you're not even aligned on strategic level. And that's where the problem lies. There is always a grassroots, and then something or the other, it just crops up in different shapes and forms. And these different shapes and forms probably are like the day-to-day arguments that you might end up having.
Yeah, I mean, often we have assumptions, don't we, based on our own culture and our experience and our upbringing. And if those assumptions are very different and we're not transparent about those, then that creates the risk, of course, that we misunderstand each other. Even like you say, something like interesting, where that should mean the same thing to everyone, but as we know, it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple example, but yet so powerful one, because it's these simple things that you don't understand on a day-to-day basis that also in the long run misalign you with your team. Another example that I would like to give is on collaboration and just the whole idea of diversity and diverse people coming on board and collaborating. And this is probably made up, or I read it somewhere. Like, imagine there's a piece of land in Africa which has never had a good yield of crop. And there's some people from the Western world, or let's say, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but also let's say the brilliant minds from Asia, they come on board and they're like, we know everything about the land fertility, soil fertility, and we are going to transform this piece of land with the farmers. We are going to collaborate with the farmers. So they bring in the best of resources and give it to the farmers, and they're like, we're doing this together with them. We've understood the problem. After a couple of months of putting in all the effort, during the time of harvest, they figure out the land was completely destroyed. And that was because there were a bunch of rhinos who were migrating from one place to another, and that was their path. And the farmers knew about that,
Yeah,
but they
but
never
people from
felt.
other continents hadn't considered the rhinos.
Yeah, exactly. And probably had someone asked the farmers, they would have mentioned it. And I mean that this is also like very cultural, right? Because
Mm.
a lot of let's say Asian and African culture is not very confrontational. They're not gonna tell you things just. I mean, the communication is always contextual, and you need to dig in deep. So that just the lack of that understanding can lead organizations or small ventures to miss out on so many like quick failures instead of the hard process of like long and painful failures, I believe.
That's right. And I think there have been plenty of examples across all kinds of industries, like the Boeing 737 had all sorts of safety issues. And one of the root causes was it was traced back to a lack of psychological safety, and just exactly what you described, people not being able to raise their hand and say, hey, there's a problem here. This isn't working, without that ability to speak up. So it can lead to real catastrophe as well.
Yeah, and I think this is where even if on the face of it you say that you have diverse set of people on board, but if they are not empowered with a voice, or if there's a lack of understanding of each other, then you're not going to leverage on that diversity for in the best way possible or in the most sustainable way possible.
No, absolutely. No, I sometimes get the feeling that the way big organizations treat diversity is more to avoid any liability, just so they kind of cover their backsides, just to avoid being, well, let's say to avoid reputational damage or to avoid any lawsuits and things like that. I don't always get the sense that there's an authentic desire to really benefit from the diversity. I mean, how have you seen it at organizations where you have experience?
I would say that yes, diversity has become like a trend now. You know, if you want to be a big organization and have a good reputation, then you need to be inclusive. You need to be diverse. But are you just doing it because you want to look a certain way, or actually you want to leverage in on, or you think this can actually make an impact in your in the culture of your organization? You know, so I think there with the innovation accelerator where we work, at least there, we have certain tools set up where we try, and I'm not going to say we are perfect, but at least we are trying to um, make use of the diversity and give
Yeah, so
people.
that was going to be my next question. Is, of course,
Yeah.
I think we agree on many of the challenges there. So if you could give, I don't know, just three tips to organizations of all sizes based on your experience, what would you recommend in terms of how they could improve things?
I think step one would be to acknowledge the differences and not put a mask on, well, we are all the same. Because quite frankly, we are not. You know, even if we are in the same platform, doing the same things, our journeys have been different. A colleague of mine, let's say from North America, who's traveled the world in her or his early 20s, has not had the same journey as me or my African colleague, you know.
Hmm.
So let's not try to just say that we're all the same and we've all had the same journey. No, our platform is now the same, but with a whole different journey. So step one is acknowledgement that there are differences and we need to unpack. And step two is to figure out different tools. One of the tools that we use is a culture map. So four different topics on the culture map. One is about communication. So there are two different types of communication: high context or low context. High context being you need beyond words to be able to decode a message,
Yeah.
which is usually seen in like Indian, Asian culture. where you saying, Steve, you saying that, okay, let's meet at 9. I need to have a follow-up to figure out, okay, do you mean what you're saying or no?
Right. You
Which,
can't take it for granted. You can't take it at face value.
exactly. For a German, that's set in stone, right? And they will be there. But, but it's not the same for other cultures. So high context and low context is, okay, be there at 11 and that's it. It's understood. Then there's other concept about trusting. How do you build trust? And it is trust built for you through task or through informal relationship, by going for a coffee or by working on a project together. How do you build trust? Which is also very different for different individuals. Then evaluation, which is around how do you give feedback and take feedback. So do you prefer having indirect negative feedback, or do you prefer direct negative feedback? And lastly, it's around confrontations or disagreements. So how you as an individual, do you avoid confrontations? Do you run away from them? Or do you like to confront things exactly when they occur? So
just to understand, is your advice then that the manager should start those conversations in a team, or how practically should someone go about implementing this?
I think a team meeting together, like this is what we implemented
Yeah.
together. We got as a team and started figuring out where do we actually land on which side, indirect or direct side of things, and then go out into a share out, right? And oftentimes this is so interesting because you realize that. The way people are, it's because of a reason. It's not just because they're trying to be too confrontational or they want to have an argument with you. It's nothing personal, but this is just their way of working. So it really gives you a more logical perspective towards people's behavior. So the next time I know Steve is giving me a feedback, I would be like, but that's his style. He doesn't mean anything personal, right? And that starts to build an understanding between the teams. So I would really say, like, managers together should sit with their team and figure out how is everyone.
And agree on a common way of working, so that people know what to expect of each other, I guess.
I think that was going to be my next point, actually, Steve. The good thing about diversity is that, yes, it brings perspective, but it also brings a lot of different ways of doing things from people, right? There's something called the organization's culture, and then there's something called the personal culture. While you might just have your personal culture and you should have all the rights to actually also follow it, whatever the belief system that you have, you should be able to work around it. Having said that, if you're working in an organization, the organization's culture will obviously supersede how you want to be, how you want to be working within an organization.
It's hard to fight the system, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, so for example, a lot of people, time management, time management and delivering things before their due date or something like that. This is something that is seen differently in different cultures. Like in some cultures, it's like, yeah, I will do it, I will do it. They will always say yes to whatever you bring on their plate, but there's no intention to do, like, they know at the back of their heads, they know they won't be able to deliver it.
Yeah.
Right? So the yes sir, yes ma'am sort of culture. But this, if accepted, is going to lead to a lot of confusion and a lot of inefficiencies in the organization. So if this is your personal culture, like you want to do things at your own pace, at your own time, this would not fit with the organization's culture or performance.
Yeah.
which should be communicated really well. So this was going to be my third point, that be very clear and precise with what is the culture of your team or the organization, or the way you would want to lead the organization. I mean, a lot of people are very used to the hierarchical way of doing things in
Yes, that's
different
right.
jobs.
This is something that has to be made clear during recruitment, I guess, right? To make it clear what kind of organization you're joining.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, having said that, not just clear during recruitment, but because even if you make it clear, sometimes they'll be like, yes, of course, we are okay with it. Of course, we are going to work this way. But I think what one of the people from our leadership has done really well is during these interviews, he does not ask you like if you'll be okay with this. He's going to dig deep into the way you've been making decisions all throughout your life, to gauge like what is the value system that you hold, and will that align with your organization's culture or no.
Yeah, so it's not enough to just say, hey, this is how we work in this company. Is that okay with you? And the person says, yeah, that's fine. Like you
Yeah,
say, you really want to dig into, okay, what's worked for you in the past, and
yeah,
what situations do you thrive in, that sort of thing.
yeah. And as a designer, I always try to think of not the most straightforward questions, because sometimes people just say things that you want to hear. So instead of asking, oh, well, how do you treat your teammates? Instead of asking that, find another creative way to ask the same question and get like the same insights.
That's right. Get a
Um,
more truthful answer. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So
Super.
yeah,
Great. Well, thanks so much for those points of advice. So maybe just to wrap it up, I'd like to get back to the first topic that we covered, which was around the technological tools. And I'm curious what your view is, how they link to diversity. And do you think using all of these tools, which help us to work in a global setting, do you think they help with diversity, or do you think they bring people together and help us to understand each other, or do you think they hide a lot of the differences that there are between us?
that's a really good question. I think the current technology that we have, right, it is bringing us together, but it's often questioned like, what is the quality of interactions though? There has to be a fine balance between like just having virtual friendships versus having real, let's say, people around you. So virtual relationships versus actually more tangible relationships. And this is what we do, we even with the UN, a part of the process is done virtually, but a section where we have to, let's say, make a judgment on the venture or understand we have to conduct a due diligence that is preferred after having met the ventures. So I don't think the technology can, I mean, or it hasn't been able to yet. It can't solve the whole, it can't replace the human touch or
No, of
human
course not. No, no.
one-on-one interaction. The kind of things you're going to gauge once you meet me versus once you see me virtually, it's very different. So while we have to be mindful of what sort of work are you trying to achieve virtually versus what sort of like team building, for example, like going to the office now, like a lot of people are against it and they really love their work from home sort of setup. But in the long run, I really question if you want to tie people up with the mission or with to create a sense of like belonging in the organization. Are you able to do it virtually? Can you do it virtually? Because at the end of the day, we are all humans. We are really wanting I mean, my guess is like if you're not able to, create that sense of togetherness even at work, you're going to see high attrition rate within the organization
For
because
sure. Yeah.
people don't really they think, yes, this is not my life, this is what I do from 9 to 5, and honestly I can just move on to the next organization if I want to.
That's right. That's certainly a risk.
Yeah. I think managers need to be smart about how much of the work is actually going to have an impact on in a larger picture, like in terms of like the bond that you create, the sense of community that you create within the system, or few of the activities that you want to run, they don't really need that sort of. I mean, if you want to have a call with your stakeholder for one time, yes, you can just have it virtually, you know. But if you want to build an ongoing relationship at some point, you got to take them out for dinner.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're gonna have to look them in the eyes, aren't you, and shake their hand. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's how you build trust in most parts of the world. So I think, yeah, just be smart about which piece can be dealt with in the most efficient way using the technology, and where do you have to have your personal touch for long-term relationship building, be it with any sort of stakeholders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, thanks very much for that advice there, Vrinda. Just to wrap up, if any of our listeners would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best channel to do so?
I'm happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. My name is Vrinda Kabra, and yeah, I think that should be the most accessible channel.
Right. Well, we'll be sure to put a link in the description of this podcast as well, if anyone would like to reach out. So, well, I just want to wrap up and say a great big thanks to you, Vrinda. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks for all your wisdom and all your clever tips on how to deal with this complex topic of diversity in the world of innovation.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really enjoyed talking about the topic as well.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Culture Edge podcast. As you heard just now, our guests are a highly diverse group of entrepreneurs and innovators, each with fantastic experience in both the corporate world and the startup world. So, subscribe to the Culture Edge podcast today and join us again for more practical advice for your career and your impact in innovation.